Hello guys, welcome to the second lesson of the CSS Crash Course, and in this lesson we're going to be looking at the ways we can implement CSS in our projects. So there are three ways or three methods of including CSS in our HTML document. So the first way would be inline styling, the second way would be an internal style sheet, and the third way we can implement it is through an external style sheet. Alright guys, so we're in VS Code here, and what I've done just to make this course a little easier to follow is create this folder here called CSS Reference Box. And now every subsequent video or topic we're going to be talking about is going to go inside this folder, and this will just act as a reference point, so if you ever need to look back on anything, it's really easy to access and find. So we're going to go inside the folder here and create a file and call this 01 underscore implementing css.html. Now let's just create a boilerplate and then give this a title of implementing CSS. To demonstrate how the three methods work, we're going to use three heading tags. So we're going to have a h1 and say my first heading, and then a h2 my second heading, and then a h3 is my third heading. And then I'm just going to open this up in Live Server. So the first method we're going to be looking at is inline styling. So we're going to style the first heading. So I'm going to go in here and just comment here inline styling, and then just give this a bit of space between the other heading. Now the way inline styling works is that you apply a unique style rule to the element by putting the CSS rule directly in the starting tag. And the way this is done is quite literally go inside the starting tag and give it a style attribute. And then the first thing we put in here is a property, so we want to change the color, and the value in here would be the color we want it to be, so let's just say red. And if you look over here in the browser, you can see now the content of my first heading has now changed to the color red. Now using inline styling is generally considered as bad practice. This is because the rules are embedded directly inside the HTML tag, and this can cause presentation to become a bit mixed up with the content of the document. And it can also be a bit hard to maintain the code, and just essentially negates the purpose of using CSS in the first place. Now before we go over the next two methods, I just want to show you guys some CSS syntax. Now when we implement CSS, we first need to put a selector, and in this example here you can see that we have a h1, and then after the h1 we have curly braces, and this is the declaration start and end. Now inside the declaration we have a property and value pairs. So as we saw in the inline styling, we first wrote the property of color and then gave it the color of red. And these two combined create our property value pair. So understanding this syntax will help you a lot when you're using CSS. So let's dive back into VS Code now and see how the other two methods work. So the next way we can implement CSS is through an internal style sheet. Now this is the exact same styling as we saw in the previous video, and this style sheet is still inside the HTML document or the same page, but we have much more wriggle room here, and we can actually style the whole document inside this internal style sheet. Now the way we implement this style sheet, we go inside the head tag. I usually go underneath the title, and this is how you usually see it. Then you just use style tags, and what I'm going to do is just put a comment above this too and say internal styling, then go back inside the style tag. Now as we saw on the slide sheet, the way we style through CSS is by first selecting our tag. So we can select tags directly. Now there are different types of selectors which we will be going over in the next video, but for this video let's just keep it simple, and I'm just going to style the h2. So I'm going to grab the h2, so this is selecting the h2, and then create my declaration or my curly braces, and this is where I insert my property value pair. So let's just change the color here to green. So first we use the property in this case is color, that's our property, and now we assign it a value, so let's just change this to green, and there's our property value pair. Now we can add more than one style in here, so let's just give this a border, so let's say solid black 2 pixels. And now you can see that our heading has a color of green and also has a black border now, which is 3 pixels thick. Now this method is effective if you just want to style one single page, but it can get a bit more complicated when your website has multiple layers. Now this is when the third method can come in. So the third method is through an external style sheet, and an external style sheet pretty much holds all the style rules in a separate document that you can link from any HTML file on your website. And to be honest, is considered the ideal way to implement CSS, largely because external style sheets are the most flexible, because you can quite literally change the whole look of an entire website by changing just one file. Now the way we implement an external style sheet is firstly creating one. So I'm just going to open the Explorer again, and then I'm just going to create a folder here, call it CSS, and then inside here I'm going to give it a file of style.css, and there's our external style sheet. Now we need to link this to the HTML document, so the way we do this, so I'm just going to close that off, so just going to toggle the world map, and then go above the title and say link, and then first we need to grab the folder, So the way this looks is CSS, so we've grabbed the folder here and then hit enter, and then this takes us inside the folder, and the first thing we select is the file, and now we've linked to this external style sheet. So I'm just going to close that off again, and then if we head into this external style sheet now, and let's just change the color of the third heading. So first we grab the selector, which is the H3, curly braces, the declaration, and let's just give it a property of color again, and let's just change this one to blue. And you can see now that our third heading has changed its color to blue. And again, we can add even more styling in here, so let's just give this a border too. So let's go underneath that property of color and say border, and say solid green 3 pixels. You can also give it padding, so padding 20 pixels. And again guys, as I mentioned, this is the ideal way to implement CSS, largely because of their flexibility, and we can change the whole look of an entire website by just changing the styling inside this external style sheet. Alright guys, just to finish the lesson off, we're just going to have a quick recap. So in this lesson we've learned the difference between the 3 types of CSS. There's internal, external and inline. Now with inline you apply the CSS rules for the specific elements inside the opening tag. Now with an internal style sheet you apply the style tags inside the head tag, and then you can style that whole specific page. And you've also got an external style sheet which you link to the HTML sheet for a separate CSS file, and then if your website for example had multiple layers, you can style it all inside that one external style sheet. But that will conclude this video guys. If you do like the content, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.